morning. A warm welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Whidbey Island. Thank you for being here this morning. It's your presence that gives meaning to our services. Even though we are not co-located, we create a sacred time when we join spirits. My name is Mavis Kaufman, and I'm delighted to serve as worship leader this morning. Sandy Welch and Sarah Richards are providing technical support, and I'm so very grateful to them for their help. Let's take a moment to center ourselves and acknowledge that these are anxious times, and many of us are unusually stressed right now. The news is so negative, divisive, and dire that we are tempted to turn away from it. Krista Tippett, host of On Being, says, "I don't think we are equipped, physiologically or mentally, to be delivered catastrophic and confusing news and pictures 24/7. We are analog creatures in a digital world." We need to be informed, but an addiction to social media is not healthy. There's even a syndrome called headline stress disorder. We need to find a healthy balance in our consumption of news. Amanda Ripley in the Washington Post suggests that 3 ingredients essential for our well-being are usually missing from the news. The first is hope. We need hope to get up in the morning. The second is agency. Humans need to feel there's something we can do to improve things. And the third is dignity. We need to feel that we matter and that our lives have worth. In her newsletter on July 28th, Heather Cox Richardson noted that Ian Millhiser, a Vox correspondent and keen observer of American politics, had just said, "This was a good week for the United States of America, and I may be coming down with a case of the hope." May we all feel a case of the hope. It is the intention of this UU community and of this worship service to help us each find and experience those ingredients: hope, agency, and dignity. To help us settle and ground ourselves for worship, let's listen to Meditation on Breathing, one of the hymns in our Teal hymnal. Please take this musical interlude as an opportunity to relax, to let go of stress, to perhaps close your eyes, and indeed, to breathe.
When
As I light our chalice this morning, you are invited to light one in your home. This flame is a symbol of our denomination and of our values. It represents the light of love, of warmth, and of connection. It represents a spark of hope, and it represents the fire of commitment and justice. Please join me as we speak together the words of our congregational affirmation, which is appearing on your screen. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is its practice. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. We have opened our services recently with a land acknowledgement. Let us remember the underlying purposes of this statement, namely, to offer recognition and respect, to counter the doctrine of discovery with the true story of the people who were already here before the arrival of white settlers, to create a broader public awareness of the history that has led to this moment, and to begin to repair relationships with Native communities and with the land. By itself, acknowledgement is a small gesture. It becomes meaningful when coupled with authentic relationships and informed action. As you may have seen, Pope Francis this week apologized to Canadian Indigenous peoples for abuses in church-run residential schools. Whether it was adequate is for others to decide, but it was a step toward reconciliation. So let us acknowledge that we gather on this land, originally known as Chikolchi, which is the ancestral home of Coast Salish peoples, including the Skagit, Tulalip, Swinomish, Snohomish, Stillaguamish, and Squamish. These peoples have lived in the Salish Sea Basin since time immemorial. We honor their sacred spiritual connection to the land and the water.
Good morning. Our wisdom story this morning centers on a remarkable woman living alone in the mountains in the mythical time of long, long ago. She was known to all far and wide for her unmatched kindness and wisdom. One fine morning, she was taking a walk along her favorite path that ran beside a mountain stream. And on this morning, she saw an unusual stone at the edge of the water. It was beautiful, unlike anything she had seen before, so she picked it up and took it back to her small cabin. A few days later, a traveler was making her way through the mountains late in the evening, lost, weary, and hungry. She came upon the cabin of the mountain woman and knocked on the door. Without pausing, the woman instantly offered the traveler food and shelter for the night. The next morning, as the traveler was preparing to continue her journey, she noticed the beautiful stone displayed on the woman's windowsill. She knew enough about precious stones to recognize that it was rare and valuable, so she asked the woman about it. In fact, she offered to buy it from her. But to her amazement, the woman gave it to her at no cost and without any hesitation. The traveler thanked her profusely and left, rejoicing in her good fortune. The stone was worth a great deal and would give her security for a lifetime. In the following weeks, the traveler covered many miles, lost in thought, always returning in her mind to the mountain woman and her extraordinary generosity. Finally, she made her way back to the cabin, the precious stone in hand. The woman was surprised to see the traveler again, and after a warm welcome, asked the traveler what had brought her back. The traveler paused, then said to the woman, "I know how valuable this stone is, and I believe you know it too." The woman smiled and said, I know that its beauty brings delight and joy to all that gaze upon it. That's true, said the traveler. And I want to return it to you in the hope that you will share with me something even more precious. Tell me, said the woman, what do I have more precious than that? Oh, dear woman, replied the traveler, I will gladly trade this stone to know what it is within you that enables you to give away such precious things to a stranger and to ask nothing in return.
Thank you, Sandy. Many have suggested that there is something sacred or holy in aspects of our ordinary everyday lives, if we stay open to seeing and feeling it. Yes, there is also brokenness. We need to see it all and respond when holiness is violated. Reverend Stephen Eddington of First Unitarian Church of Littleton, Massachusetts, has said, "When people go hungry or are innocently caught in the ravages of war, then the sacred is violated. When the earth is despoiled by human greed, the sacred is violated. When a person's essential human dignity is demeaned because of their race or gender or ethnicity or faith stance or sexual orientation or station in life, the sacred is violated. When we see the holy profaned or when we violate it ourselves, we are called to renewal and recommitment. We are called to be agents of healing, reconciliation, and transformation in the broken places of life. Our commitment to the sacred can show up in the relatively small things in life. For me, some of the most precious things are not, in fact, things, but relationships. Relationships with others sustain and nourish me. Unfortunately, I'm not always an ideal steward of those relationships. On occasion, I don't think as carefully as I should before saying something that turns out to be hurtful. One such exchange happened here at UUCWI several years ago. I spoke carelessly and hurt someone's feelings. I stewed for days, growing more and more aware of my error, and finally reached out to apologize and ask forgiveness. The miracle was that the other person not only forgave me, but did so in such a gracious, generous way that I was both humbled and stunned. It was a valuable lesson in how to interact, and I've carried that lesson with me ever since. May we all continue our quests for the holy and keep our lives in a holy place.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, yeah, we We are blessed with love and amazing grace, and our heart is in a holy place. When we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we share the power of each other's faith, and our heart is in a holy place, and our heart is in a holy place, then our heart is in a holy place.
So, what is sacred or holy in your life? Let's build a word cloud together, here and now. Some of you have done this before. We've done it a couple of times, and I'm going to be grateful to Sandy and Sarah for helping set this up. They'll do their magic and set things up behind the scenes. It's a little fussy for them, so please be patient. Please open your chat and enter your answer to the question, what do you consider or find sacred? Best laid plans. We will create a word cloud and maybe include it in an e-news in the future. But I saw the things going by: art, beauty, animals, the numinous irrigation pipes, relationships, spirit, water, children, wilderness, all animals. Charles Lloyd's Coke bottle. I'll have to look at that one. Healing waters, flowers. Okay, so we will work on this offline. Thank you. We'll save the chat. So it's a joy to welcome Joseph Bednarik back to our virtual pulpit today. He's with us several times each year, and as many of you know, he's co-publisher of Copper Canyon Press in Port Townsend during the week when he's not in a Unitarian pulpit somewhere in the Puget Sound. He always picks intriguing titles, and today's is no exception. Nina Simone's Gum. Welcome, Joseph.
It is a pleasure to be here. I'm just want to make sure that everything is groovy, technologically, etc. That we're here, we've arrived. You know what? Something's goofy over on my side. I love the fact that services are run by human beings. It's fantastic, and we all get to practice the grace of being human beings and trying to run all sorts of keeping all the plates spinning, as they say. So thank you very much for those people scenes making things happen here today. And I love that phrase, right? Nina Simone's Gum. Now, I read those words on the cover of a recently published book, and I thought, my first thought was, what? And I looked closer, and I discovered a quote from the iconic musician Nick Cave. His words printed in very small type on the front cover, and those words read, Warren Ellis, who is the musician who wrote the book. Warren Ellis has turned this memento, snatched from his idol's piano in a moment of rapture, into a genuine religious artifact. So I started to wonder, what is the equal sign between the three words Nina Simone's Gum and the three words genuine religious artifact? Now, sufficiently intrigued to the point of pulling out my wallet, I bought the book, opened up to the copyright page. As a publisher, I always read the fine print of the copyright page. I'm sure that I'm among allies in that regard. And then I dutifully read the dedication page, which says gracefully and gratefully another three words: for our teachers. Seems like a perfect dedication to this sermon, for our teachers. So I dove into the book, and somewhere in the middle of this fantastical and true tale of how an object as worthless as a chewed piece of gum turned into a priceless relic displayed behind bulletproof glass in an exhibit. I was gifted a copy of the book, by someone else who sensed I needed a book called Nina Simone's Gum, and now I had 2 copies in my library. So when I finished reading the book that I had bought, I sent that off to a dear friend. And I love the fact that all the Nina Simone books in my library have either been a gift or have served as a gift. And I love that kind of gifty flow. And here's a gift of words from Nina Simone herself. She was a great musician, singer, a very devout activist. And here's one of her sentences. You've got to learn to leave the table when love's no longer being served. You've got to learn to leave the table when love's no longer being served. It's like incredibly wise counsel. And so the story that inspired this book, taking this information from the dust jacket of the book, it was at the end of 1999. Actually, Dr. Nina Simone, she insisted on being called Dr. Nina Simone, gave a rare performance as part of a music festival in the United Kingdom. And after the show, in a state of just awe, the musician Warren Ellis kind of lofted himself on stage, took Nina Simone's piece of chewed gum from the piano. He wrapped it in her stage towel and then put it in a Tower Records bag. The gum remained with him, carefully protected, carefully preserved, as a sacred totem, as his creative muse. And the gum grew in significance with every passing year. Now, 20 years after that rare performance by Nina, fellow musician and bandmate Nick Cave asked Warren whether there was any object that he could contribute to a display in a forthcoming exhibit called Stranger Than Kindness, which was scheduled to appear at the Royal Danish Library in Copenhagen. And Warren realized that the time had come to release the gum from his personal possession and to share it with the world. And so together, the 2 musicians agreed that the chewed gum should be housed in a glass case like a holy relic. And then worrying that the gum would be damaged or lost in all this hubbub, Warren decided to first, I love this, have it cast in silver and in gold. Now, Nina Simone's gum reveals how something seemingly insignificant and disposable can form beautiful connections between people. It's a story about the meaning that we bestow on objects and experiences, sort of like what we talked about at Time for All Ages this morning. This stone has, objective value in the world, but its even greater value is to learn the lesson of generosity and flow. And also how objects can just be imbued with spirituality. It's a celebration of the artistic process and the incomparable power of art, of friendship, of understanding, of love. I've read the book. It's a fascinating book. And truth be told, I was completely seduced by how something so small and worthless became such a potent force in the lives of many people. And just someone doesn't have their mute on. If we could make sure that everyone has their mute on, I'm hearing some ambient noise coming through. In the book, with its suggestions of religious and spiritual meaning, inspired me to think about and to consider religious relics, what they are, how they came to be, if I quote unquote believe in the power of relics, how far I might travel in body, in mind, and spirit to engage with the holy relic. Now, growing up Lutheran, I had no formal religious instruction regarding the importance and the power of holy relics, because holy relics essentially, they weren't that important. They weren't important at all, actually. Lutherans, in trying to reform the church, that reform being the root word for reformation in Protestant Reformation and church with a capital C, church, the Catholic Church. Lutherans, or Luther, argued that everybody had a direct and personal relationship with God, and they did not need any intermediaries, saints or priests or relics or indulgences, for that relationship to exist. So for Lutherans, holy relics were essentially ignored because God was on speed dial through prayer, and it made no difference whether the person dialing was an impoverished peasant or an exalted priest. God's phone rang and God picked up. And I realize that the illustration isn't perfect because the Protestant Reformation predates telephones by 4 centuries. We get the gist. Now fast forward from Lutheran Sunday young teenager to being in San Francisco on a business trip in my late 30s, where I had my really first and very profound experience with religious relics. This story is embedded in one of my homilies about labyrinths. So if you've heard that homily, some of the details on this might ring familiar. But a friend and I were strolling through Chinatown in San Francisco on a lazy Sunday morning, and our ultimate destination was to go experience firsthand, or first foot, as it were, the famous labyrinth at Grace Cathedral. During our Chinatown stroll, we discovered this poster stapled to a telephone pole, and I love the information that gets passed on those telephone pole signs. Well, this telephone pole poster informed us that the quote-unquote Heart Shrine Relic Tour was in town. And we read a little deeper, started reading the fine print. And in fact, the sacred Buddhist relics that were on tour were only a few blocks away from where we stood. And the place was opened. So since fate had, or luck, or the universe had brought us to the perfect alignment of place and time, we considered the sign a sign, and we decided to visit the relics, which were at the Sun Yat-sen Memorial Hall. And once there, we discovered a very, very long, winding line of people moving slowly into the deeper recesses of the building. Now, there were bilingual signs in both Chinese and English asking that prayers and blessings be made to bring peace to the world. This was back in 2003, and the stressed world at that time was in the midst of hot wars. There were high alert fears from terrorism, and the Taliban had just blown up the massive Buddhas of Bamiyan, showing the world in no uncertain terms that sacred art carved into mountains was not sacred to everyone, and that one person's sacred was another person's blasphemy. Now, as my friend and I entered Memorial Hall, we were handed an English language brochure that read, quote, "Relics are the remains of beings who have devoted their entire lifetime to virtuous spiritual practice dedicated to the welfare of sentient beings. Every part of their body and remains carries positive energy to inspire goodness and to reduce negativity. Due to the brochure, due to the power of the relics, anyone who sees, hears of, touches, or even thinks of relics will receive their blessings." Now, since you are hearing about these relics during this sermon dedicated to 4-hour teachers, consider yourself blessed. The flyer continues, quote, "Most of us have delusions, and the holy relics can purify even the heaviest negative karmas created by us in countless lifetimes," close quote. So keeping our place in line and moving step by step ever deeper into Memorial Hall, it became quite apparent that we did not really know what we had gotten ourselves into. Something profoundly holy, something profoundly alien was going on right before our eyes, and we were in the thick of it. I started to feel uncomfortable, as if we had transgressed into a sacred space that wasn't ours. I don't enjoy being a tourist, and I especially don't enjoy being a spiritual tourist. I much prefer the rigors and the discoveries of genuine travel. Now, that said, we trusted. We trusted, and we kept moving along this winding line toward the altar, toward the relics, toward a monk sitting on a platform. The monk was blessing pilgrims and elders and young folk. People unscrewed their water bottles that they were carrying, and the monk blessed the water. I was moved. I could feel tears welling. Something was happening to me. Candles were flickering, and the light was reflecting off the golden Buddha statue. I could not help but think of the Buddhas of Bamiyan and that pile of rubble that their massive bodies had become, and how the rubble, how each small fleck of sandstone could become a holy relic, perhaps enough relics for every human being who wished to carry one. And now the soft sounds of the feet moving forward, ever forward, elderly women placed palm to palm and bowed. The line kept winding, moving forward. And finally, I arrived to face tiny dishes and glass vials of relics, apparently bone fragments of enlightened beings. Now, to be honest, I really didn't see anything, though I was feeling plenty. The line kept moving past an elaborate altar toward a living, breathing, holy person, a monk, a lama, I'm not sure, who was offering blessings to those who approached. Now, at this point, I felt very, very conflicted. I was simultaneously curious. I had come along this long line, while also feeling like I am not where I should be. I considered getting out of line, and then I saw two children approach the monk for blessing their water. And the monk puffed some air into their plastic bottles and smiled. This is 18 years before COVID. Now, consider that. Cheap plastic bottles holding blessed water. Priceless, worthless. Now, finally, it was my turn. The random spotting of a poster stapled to a telephone pole brought me right here, right now, this moment. I stepped forward. I was given instructions. I placed my palms together and I bowed. And after what seemed like hours, the monk touched my head. And for me, there was that swirling of emotions, the tears that welled, while simultaneously the brain at full whirl, wondering whether I belonged, wondering whether I had the right to be present at this elaborate, holy place, temporarily constructed in a community center. The monk blessed me, and I accepted his blessings. The relics blessed me, and I accepted their blessing. It seemed to me that the lesson is that sometimes we need to calm our intellects, our fierce and fencing intellects, and allow the flickering candles, the shimmering Buddha, the blessing monks, and the holy relics to do their work. And move beyond the gates and the walls and the doors and the traps of who, what, where, when, why. Quiet the mind, experience a different kind of consciousness, a different kind of conscious space. And when my friend and I walked out of that memorial hall, we saw a van with a sign on the luggage rack: if no anger, then no enemy. If no anger, then no enemy. That remains one of my all-time favorite if-then statements. Now, having been thusly blessed, we made our way to the labyrinth at Grace Cathedral, and we had another emotional, what I will call spiritual experience in the middle of downtown San Francisco, though that is a story for another time. This story today is about Nina Simone's gum, and it is legitimate to ask, do I believe that Nina Simone's gum is a holy relic? To answer that question, a quick second story. A couple of months ago, early May, I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico on another business trip. Smoke clouds from raging forest fires billowed over the ridgeline of the nearby mountains. The phrase "world on fire" came easily to mind. One day I had the afternoon off, so I typed the phrase Santa Fe relics into my favorite search engine, and it turns out that within a mile of my hotel, there was the Cathedral Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi, which contained a reliquary. I love visiting cathedrals and allowing that specific architecture, right, that sacred geometry to work its mathematical magic on me. For those atheist humanists who exist in the world, please go visit a cathedral with a calculator and a book just showing us amazing geometry. You will be impressed. Once inside, I took my time to really feel the place. My eyes needed to adjust from the bright sunshine. I needed to get settled, kind of what we did earlier today in the service, to settle ourselves. I watched the sunlight stream through the stained glass. I visited each painting depicting the Stations of the Cross. And eventually, I found myself at the reliquary. I was in the presence of nearly 24 relics, including a piece of Mother Teresa's hair, a bone chip from St. Francis of Assisi, a piece of the Blessed Virgin Mary's veil, and most astonishing to me, I was, I'm late 50s. I'd never seen this before. Again, Lutheran growing up. Most astonishing to me, a piece of the Holy Cross, the so-called true cross. Now, most of the relics were displayed in these special containers made of metal and glass, finely crafted with symbols and artistic effects such as sunbursts. I slipped a few folded bills through the donation slot. I lit 2 candles. I took a flyer describing the relics, and I snapped a few photos. And looking over the brochure, I noted this sentence printed in bold on the lower back panel. The church, again, capital C, church, the church approves honor being given to the relics that with reasonable probability can be considered authentic. Now, the phrase with reasonable probability can be considered authentic seemed like a huge exit ramp to me. And then while sitting in a pew next to the font that burbled holy water that spilled into a walk-in baptismal font, and there I was, in a cathedral in the high desert, with forest fires billowing smoke, listening to water burble and fall, astonished, truly astonished, to be near a fleck, a piece, a sliver of the true cross that we used to brutally crucify a teacher called Jesus. Again, this sermon for our teachers. That wood chip would be over 2,000 years old. The piece of veil from his mother, the Blessed Virgin, would be over 2,000 years old. Sunlight was flaring through stained glass. And then it happened. I watched an elderly woman dip her fingers into the burbling water of the font and cross herself. And soon thereafter, an elderly man, they were a couple, did the same. And that water, no doubt, flowed from the city's pipe, municipal water. Same water that flowed into hotels and homes, restaurants and waiting pools. This water, burbling into the cathedral basilica of St. Francis of Assisi, this water was holy. And believers dipped their fingers into the holy water and performed a ritual that has been repeated billions upon billions of times over the past 2,000 years. Millions, if not billions, of believers are doing so today. Now, my guess is that many of us here this morning have dipped our fingers into holy water and we've crossed ourselves. And I recalled that Buddhist monk from the Heart Shrine Relic Tour in San Francisco blessing the water of young children and blessing the water of elders, and that water being carried in cheap plastic bottles. Now, I did not dip my fingers into the font. I did not cross myself. I held back because Catholicism isn't my religion and I wasn't being guided. It was just on my own and I just didn't feel comfortable doing so. I did return to the hotel and I researched the true cross, and I discovered that I could buy a sliver of the true cross on eBay for the starting bid of $1,000. Now, this seemed to reinforce the phrase, with reasonable probability, these relics can be considered authentic. And every Catholic and fallen Catholic that I talked with in preparation for this sermon told me a story about their engagement with holy relics, always mentioning to a person every time a healthy skepticism about the veracity of the relics. And I would say, you can buy a piece of the true cross on eBay. I would say, exactly, they would respond. Which to close leads us back to the holy relic of Nina Simone's gum. Now, objectively, this piece of gum chewed by an iconic musician is simultaneously worthless and priceless. Now think about the power of that. The relic is simultaneously worthless. It is a chewed piece of gum, and priceless. it actually could not be insured. No insurance company would insure that piece of gum. Now, the original piece of gum is currently on display in Montreal in the Hall of Gratitude as part of an exhibit called Stranger Than Kindness. Now, I will admit that this is strange indeed. Now, this single piece of gum, complete with teeth marks and backstory, it sits atop a marble stand, tastefully lit within a recessed cabinet fronted by bulletproof glass. Now, this gum and its museum quality presentation is both an absurd and a glorious monument to human creativity and, more importantly, to meaning making. This gum can be rationally dismissed out of hand as refuse, and I use refuse intentionally as both refuse and refuse. And the gum can be treated like a holy relic. Now, I know this because a few weeks ago, I was actually standing in the presence of the gum. I was alone in the Hall of Gratitude. I was traveling on the East Coast to visit my elderly parents in my hometown of Western New York. I had attended a Lutheran worship service with them inside a glorious cathedral that houses an amazing pipe organ. I will always let a pipe organ do its magic on me. I opened my heart at this service. I allowed the architecture, I allowed the organ to inspire as much spiritual loft as possible. I listened intently to the gospel reading. I listened intently to the sermon. And when offered, I took communion. Now, all the believers who took communion that fine summer morning, they were eating the body and drinking the blood of Jesus Christ. Now, that belief is called the real presence, where the consecrated wine and bread are united with the real body and blood of Jesus. And so please consider, we have holy water in the high desert. We have the body and blood of Christ in a small town in Western New York. We have bone chips from enlightened beings in Chinatown. We have the true cross on eBay. We have rubble, dust from the Buddhas of Bamiyan at the base of a mountain in Afghanistan. And we have Nina Simone's gum in a place called the Hall of Gratitude. Now, the morning after attending church, my wife and daughter and I drove a rented car, and eventually we landed in Montreal. We were making a pilgrimage. It was our goal to see a worthless piece of gum that was once chewed by an iconic musician, a singer, and an activist. The gum is displayed in an exhibit called Stranger Than Kindness. And once I was face to face with this holy relic, standing alone in a dim gallery, I did as I was instructed to do so many years ago in Chinatown. I gently placed palm to palm. I bowed, and I prepared my heart and my mind to receive whatever blessings flowed. For our teachers. Amen.
Thank you, Joseph. As you know, our congregation is completely self-supporting. Your gifts of time, talent, and treasure are what keep us going. As we listen to our closing song, I will hope you will show that you value UUCWI by making a donation. You can write a check and mail it to our post office box, or you can go to our website, uucwi.org, click on the donate button, and make a donation online. One of our all-time favorite hymns is Blue Boat Home, with lyrics by Peter Mayer set to an old Welsh hymn tune. Although Peter attended Catholic seminary and led music at a Catholic church for many years, he says he left the Catholic tradition in 1995 and is now a member of a UU congregation and considers himself a religious naturalist. That explains the lyrics to this song we're going to hear. The closing piece is Peter's original song, Everything is Holy Now. This video was created by our friend Connie Barlow, and you'll hear Peter singing and playing.
When I was a boy, each week on Sunday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. And when I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two, and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad, miracles don't happen still, but now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, it barely wet my fingertips, but now I have to hold my breath like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Child's face, say it's not a testament, that'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come, say it's not a sacrament, I tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush and singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now.
No matter how anxious or helpless we feel sometimes, we each have gifts that can make a difference in the world. So this coming week, may we each do at least one thing to support and cheer someone, to affirm the sacred, to show love, and to do the work of justice. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of love we carry into the world. Amen, shalom, salam, namaste, and blessed be. Thank you for being here.